Hi everyone, this is Stephen, and today I want to show you a short video on what's called the naysayer, chapter 6 from our textbook, They Say, I Say. So I'm going to optimize this, see if that'll work, and there we go. Okay, so now when you're writing your paper, notice that I'm using They Say, I Say to give you different small tools for writing. So one tool is you've got these two essays, you've read them, you've written an essay on them, and you're starting to make an argument. Like, I agree with Carr, or I agree with Thompson, and you're saying why. Ideally, you're using examples from your experience or that of others. You're also using research and, from the articles. But one of the things I want you to notice about arguments in general is that it's useful to think about what's called the naysayer. The naysayer is, you've got an argument going. You agree with Carr, you agree with Thompson, and you lay out your points. And then you think, well, hold on, what would somebody say who disagrees with me or sees that maybe there's a part of what I'm saying that isn't completely obvious or agreeable to other people? What would be a way for me to address those other concerns? So that's what the naysayer is. The naysayer is imagining what somebody else might say, like, wait a minute, wasn't Google it's so fast and easy, you really want to throw it away just for this other thing? Or are you really sure it distracts you? What if it's your fault, not Google's fault? And so on. So you think about how to address the naysayer, bring that naysaying up, that negative thing about your own thesis, and then try to address it. Sometimes you can completely address it, dismiss it. Sometimes you say, it's true, Google is fast, or this and that, and you show what people say on the other side. And then you say, but I still believe that it's more important to see these downsides. You could go the other direction with Thompson, of course. You could say, well, Thompson has all this good stuff. I agree with him. I think we can use technologies well if we cooperate with them, sort of like cyborgs. And then you might say, but the naysayer, like Carr, says, yeah, but isn't this getting us to read more superficially? Isn't this might be hurting our ability to actually think because of Thompson's stuff on, brain science. So pick a point that goes against yours and then try to address it. Okay, so here we are with a little bit of a PowerPoint, and this is basically, you think about, lots of times you're like worried, well, what if somebody disagrees with me? And a lot of times we're afraid of that, like, oh, I don't know if this is right or this or that. So in a way, take the doubt that you have and turn it to your advantage by saying, okay, what would somebody else say about this? You don't have to be right, all the time. You just have to be making an argument. As you think about it, you might think about ways that points on the other side. And it's better to acknowledge than ignore an argument. So skeptics may object. So we can call these counter arguments. What would somebody say? Well, I don't know, that I believe Carr, that he's that this stuff is really, the science isn't clear about the brain, etc. So you can sort of come up with what somebody might say in opposition to him. So for ours, we're going to use the naysayer as a counter argument. So you can, if you've taken classes in argument before, it's just, well, what are the arguments against mine? What's the counter argument? So what does it mean to do that? So to do that, you incorporate viewpoints in your essay that might be against you. You incorporate a they say that might be against you. And it could be a naysay from an article. Like, for example, if you like Thompson, you could say, but Carr says. Or if you use Carr, you could say, but Thompson says. Or you could make it just some critic, like yourself, or anybody. Oh, well, Carr says this, but a thoughtful person might say, yeah, but it sounds like, I disagree with this part, or I think Google is really valuable, and etc. So think of it as being in chess. So you're making moves ahead of what your reader is likely to think of as a counter-argument. Because a lot of times when you're reading, you think, well, yeah, but is this true? Is that true? So addressing that makes your piece a lot stronger. So here's this scenario if you're in high school, right? So, you want to go to a party. So you think about your parents and what their objections might be. And what do you say? You anticipate those, and you say, I'm going to go to a party, we're going to go to an Uber. That solves the problem of objection about alcohol or whatever. I studied on Monday, so it solves their objection number 2, think let's go back. Let's go back for a second. Let's see if we can get this to be a little bit smaller. Yeah, we're not getting that whole slide. Okay, no worries. So again, there's it's the big test on Monday, etc. You deal with the objections, and then you'll be home at midnight. So the idea here is that you address them. We do this in real life all the time. Somebody's going to be maybe not want to agree with you, so you anticipate their disagreement. Okay, so what's the purpose of planting this? Because you are a part of a dialogue, remember that thing about conversation, you're seen as somebody who's involved in a conversation with others. So you're anticipating others, including naysayers, and that enhances your credibility. You're someone who's thinking about all the different people that might be thinking of this, rather than just your own point. This is like going from like a more high school argument where you just make points to a more sophisticated college level argument where you're anticipating counter-arguments. Also, you come across as, and I hope you will be, generous and open-minded. Okay, this isn't me wanting to be right. This conversation is bigger than me. What do other people say, and how do I respond to what they say? So templates. So one of the templates you can use is, of course, many will disagree because on the grounds that, Google's really easy. It's ubiquitous. I've gotten good experiences in Google. I mean, it's a good way for me to find articles quick, whatever. Yet some readers may be challenged by my view by insisting that. So these are all ways to say, however, some, other people may think differently. And these are just some ways that we do it in school. Where do you place that? You can go at the beginning, in the middle, the end of a paragraph, or it could be an entire paragraph. I want to suggest that you put it at the end. So after you've made all your arguments, and you can see on the video that I showed where I went over the paper, she's got 3 pretty good points. Then at the 4th point, you can say, well, but people say this, some may argue this, and then you address those. So you're trying to address those pieces. And a couple of things. One is you can show why somebody's wrong. That's not true. Or you can say, even though that's true, this other thing is truer. So yes, even though Google does get us a lot of, quickly gets a lot of, let's say, articles, lots of those articles aren't very good. They're not nearly the kind of range that you can find in a library. It looks like we're seeing all these articles, but we're not really. So you can both completely say that the other person's wrong, or you can acknowledge what's true about it, but then emphasize a thing that's more true. Like if you were buying a car, yeah, that car is it's a beautiful car and it has some good paint job and the tires are really tight, but the compression in the engine is bad, and that's a bad thing. So even though these other parts are good, I'm going to go with the engine is wrong, therefore we're not going to buy the car. What happens if you don't plant any naysayers? So people come across your text as closed-minded, like, oh, well, this person is just arguing their own point. They're not thinking about other people. Also, typically when we're reading, you can think about objections. If you don't answer them, then those objections get unanswered. And sometimes it generates more stuff to write about. Like, okay, you agree, but what would you say to people who disagree? And sometimes that gets your mind going, and you can make more arguments. How do you represent them fairly? This is a big deal for me. So you want to imagine that you're giving that person who's a naysayer the best possible representation of their argument. You want to stay with it for 2 or 3 sentences. Don't just go, well, some people say Google is quicker, but I say. Try to say what they would say about that. In other words, show the quicker, explain why it's so much easier, etc. And then what's the way to object it? First, you might want to make sure that the objection you raised isn't more convincing than your argument. So sometimes that happens, in which case you maybe change your thesis. Answer them simultaneously. So in other words, you make concessions. Yes, some of this is true, but this other part isn't as true, or my point is more important for these reasons. And here's the stand your ground piece. While it's true that Google is quick, it doesn't necessarily follow that Google is the best, kind of thing. And that's a way to set that up. And then we're going to talk about a little bit of this when we look at counter-argument PowerPoint a little bit later. I hope that was useful for you. I'm going to get out of this piece here. And that's the naysayer. I will try to also put up an example of a naysayer on Canvas. All right, so remember, when you're writing your paper, when you're revising it, consider using a naysayer in your paper. It's an important part of what I'm trying to teach with this piece. Okay, take care.